This month on Stir, we are exploring the book of Job, and we're talking with our friend Megan about her personal story of suffering, grief, and faith. Megan, thank you so much for being with us today. Um, if you could, please give us some background on how old you were and what happened.
Okay, so about 7 years ago, I was 39 and pregnant with my second child. So very excited. And then we went in for our 13-week ultrasound. And as the tech was going through the ultrasound, she wasn't saying anything. So I thought, this is kind of odd. And then she just turned it off and said, I'll be right back. And I thought, this is just can't be good. And sure enough, probably about 10 or 15 minutes later, she came back and said, okay, I want you to come with me and talk to a doctor. So they brought us, my husband was with me, and they brought us to a little room with a doctor. And um, she explained that what they were seeing on the ultrasound indicated that our child had trisomy 18. So the typical sign, the symptoms of that vary from child to child, but it's heart problems, kidney issues, clubbed hands and feet, intellectual disabilities, so enlarged or miniaturized features like the head, seizure possibilities. So not good news, not the news we were hoping for. And so her first suggestion was that we abort. And that was, at least she threw me an easy one because I could just knew exactly how to respond to that. No. And don't ever, that's off the table. That we don't need to consider that at all. So after that, kind of a blur, I guess. I mean, she was kind of explaining things, but the shock of it, um, we didn't really know what to do with that. I remember driving home and just kind of sometimes when things like this happen to me, I just go into a flurry of like action. Like I feel like I have to do something. So I was contacting people and kind of giving them a, a quick rundown and asking for prayers. And we were actually at a doctor's office that was very close to our pastor. So we drove straight to his house and got anointed immediately. So the grief process starts almost immediately, and even before you even know what you're dealing with. So I guess the first step was kind of researching. I mean, I didn't know what trisomy 18 was, and I'm sure the doctor must have explained it, but like I said, that was quite a blur. So then finding out the issues and concerns and the life expectancy, which is very small. Most trisomy babies live maybe 2 weeks after they're born, but a lot die within the first 3 months of pregnancy. So then your prayers kind of shift. Well, mine did anyway. Okay, just let's make it through that first trimester. Let's make it through the second trimester. I just wanted the baby as long as I could. And then I we decided, well, I think I decided more, but I said we got to give him a name so that we can be praying specifically. And I don't know, there's something about putting a name to it that was helpful. And that ended up being hard on my husband because I wanted to name him after my husband. So James Paul. So that made it harder for him. Um, it meant a lot to him, but it made it harder. And just, we kept going through the checkups, and that was hard because the doctors were not really positive. It was sort of like just reminding me consistently that, okay, this is what we're dealing with, and this, your baby could die at any moment. And, it was very different from my first pregnancy, that's for sure. Um, but But then you would be at home and it would just be normal. It would be just like your first pregnancy, the joy and the excitement. And when he got old enough to start kicking, I mean, everything was so typical that it was weird to wrap my head around the fact that he might not make it. Or he probably won't make it. Like this, it just doesn't, it's not computing, it's not connecting because everything seems to be progressing. He was growing. Um, Not as much as maybe he should have been, but he was still growing. And like I said, he was kicking, you could feel him. And so it was still the miracle of life going on. It was kind of interesting to go through the emotions the way I was going through them. It was kind of interesting to me that I was so excited and happy at times. And then, you get a call from the doctor or somebody got your prayer request and they send a sympathetic message and it's like, oh yeah, reality, and I mean, that's just how it happens. So we made it to 29 weeks, and I was teaching school at this point. It was a Tuesday, and I went to school and I was helping out the sub, and I wasn't feeling very well. And there were signs that I was going into labor, but I resisted. I mean, man, I resisted. I was like, no, no, this is not happening. I'm not going to let this happen. Uh, Somehow I thought I could control that. But my roommate, I shared a classroom with a very good friend of mine. She said, "Look, you don't look good." She said, I'm calling the hospital." And they said, "Yeah, you got to bring her in right now." And sure enough, uh, it was progressing and it was going to happen. And that was really hard for me. Because I thought, well, this is it. And, you know, you, there's nothing you can do to prepare for that moment. Um, but he, he was able to, so the next thing the doctor said was, okay, look, we've made it this far. He's still alive and you're going to go through labor and go ahead and give birth. She said, but these babies, the birthing process is really hard on them. I mean, it's just really hard. So most likely this is how it's going to end up. So you're trying to think through that and the pain of labor is still there. The contractions are still a big deal. But my husband was with me and Audrey. Audrey was 3 years old and she was holding my hand the whole time. And she was very concerned every time a contraction hit. But we made it through and we made it through labor and James was born alive. And that was a huge blessing. That was just a huge blessing to me. And I remember the moment he was born. I mean, just the literal moment that he was born, I was filled with a euphoria I have never before or since experienced. But at that exact same time, Paul was feeling the dead opposite. And he is not an emotional person, visibly. And but at that moment, I'm experiencing like the most euphoric moment of my life. And over in the out of the corner of my eye, I can see him experiencing one of the worst moments of his life, just sobbing and it was really hard. Um, but then we had such sweet moments after that. We had James. I think the doctor said he probably lived for about 45 minutes. I think it might have been less than that. He only had two chambers in his heart, so he could not oxygenate his blood. And my prayer was that I would see him alive. So I was excited for that, but my bigger prayer was that he wouldn't suffer. And he didn't appear to suffer at all. I mean, here was another mercy. He was born perfect looking. I mean, he had an omphalocele, so all of his organs were on the outside, but they had him wrapped up, so you couldn't see that. You just saw his perfect little face and his hands were clubbed, but it just looked like he was getting cozy. Um, just perfect. He was just perfect. And Audrey was holding him and kissing him 1,000 times. And just everybody that came into the room was, shh, my brother is sleeping. My brother is sleeping. And he was, right? He was put to sleep. So it's a special memory for me. This was especially devastating. It's devastating to lose a child, but also because this was kind of our last opportunity. This was our last opportunity. It felt like more than one loss. So it felt like multiple losses. And so when this happens, at least for me, it's just a constant why. I mean, as soon as we found out, the question immediately is, why, God? Why? Why? And you think, okay, well, I probably deserve this, that's just, I've lived a certain life and this is deserved. And I'm not saying that that's why it happened. I don't actually believe that. It's more that you explore the questions of why, I guess. And so God was I would say the way I felt about God in this situation was like the grief process itself. There are all these emotions involved with grief. Like you've got the denial and the anger and the acceptance and the just all of that. And I would say that was reflected in how I was relating to God. There were times when I was in denial with God. There were times when I was angry at God. There were times when I was like, okay, God, I understand this is your will. Help me get through it. Um, and there was, even with all of those emotions, there was a closeness with God through that. And I think ultimately the closeness came because no matter how hurt and confused I was, and no matter how questioning I was or angry I was with God, I kept feeling him saying, it's okay. I'm still here. It's okay. Look, I'm still here. Kind of like a parent to a child, right? Like maybe a child is throwing a tantrum and you're like, it's okay. I'll be here. I'm going to let you have that tantrum, but just come back to me when you're ready. And so I want to tell you about some of the mercies and blessings. I mean, I mentioned the fact that James was born alive and with no pain, and Audrey too, and more on Audrey because she had to deal with death at such a young age. Death wasn't a concern to her. She wasn't scared of it. She just understood it automatically as a part of life. And instead, her focus became really honed in on the resurrection. I mean, I had a 4 year old child who would constantly talk about the resurrection and seeing her baby brother. And she wants to know, when is that resurrection? When can she see her baby brother? So there were just incredible things that happened that even in my resistance to God at times, I also had to admit, okay, but man, he's being pretty nice. He's helping me through this. Um, I just want to mention two more things about that. While I was pregnant with James, before I found out that he had trisomy 18, I had just planted this garden of pincushion flowers. And so during my pregnancy, they all started blooming. I mean, it was incredible. The blooms were incredible. Well, guess what? It kept blooming and blooming and blooming. And that year we got snow and ice, and those flowers popped right up through the ice and the snow, and they bloomed for a solid year. And that's unheard. I mean, they don't do that. They haven't done it since. So that was really special. Um, and then finally, unfortunately, Audrey's best friend at church had almost the exact same situation. Um, her mother was pregnant and with a girl who was diagnosed with trisomy 18, and they lost her though at 3 months, I think. Um, but what was really interesting was after that happened, Audrey and her friend got on the phone together and talked for about an hour about what it was like to lose a sibling, what it was like to be an only child. And they were just consoling each other. And it was just the most, I mean, when you think of Christ telling us to become as little children, that's one of those moments where you're like, oh, like that. Just wholly innocent and empathetic and sharing and caring and just all the wonderful things.
Meaghan, thank you so much for sharing that. And I know that you did seek out some professional counseling. So can you take us through what was it that prompted you to finally seek counseling from a professional? And what was that process like for you?
So the decision to seek counseling came a couple of months after James died. And I think it was because, people were very sympathetic and they tried to be empathetic, and that was nice and appreciated, of course, but it would just, I just wanted to talk. And I got it. Nobody made me feel this way, but you just start to feel like maybe I shouldn't be talking anymore. Like sometimes you feel like maybe there's this end point on grief. Like you're only given so long, and then it's sort of like, okay, we got to get back to our lives. We can't just talk about your baby for the rest of our life. So going to counseling, I thought, oh, well, wait, I could get some counseling, and this person has to listen to me. I'm paying them, right? So but it just sounded good. It sounded good to just be able to go and talk to somebody. So I just started praying about it and researching Christian psychologists online. And I will say I found the best. I mean, God led me to the counselor because it was an ideal situation. And it was just nice. It was nice to talk to somebody just very openly. I felt like I could say whatever I wanted and it wouldn't offend them. It's not going to hurt their feelings, and they're not going to think differently of me. They don't know me. They're not going to be judging me. They're just going to listen. And so that was really beneficial for me. Toward the end of the counseling, I went probably for about 6 months. She said, Meaghan, you don't need this. She said, what did she, how did she put it? You're the most like analytical person of yourself I've ever met. So I said, well, but I like it. It's so nice. It's like I have this appointment to talk about James once a week, and I just love it. I don't want to let it go. But um, so it was beneficial to me that way. It's one of the things I did learn kind of in conjunction with counseling was the word and, which was a big deal to me. um, you can be happy for someone and still sad about what you're going through. I mean, at that time, my brother had just had a baby, and I thought, oh man, I got to just be excited. I mean, that's how can I not? And I was. I mean, ultimately, but at the same time, I was also sad for myself and jealous. And then she was like, but you can be both. And so you don't have to pick. You don't have to pretend and be happy. You don't have to put on this face. You can be happy and you can be sad. And it was very simple, but revelatory for me personally.
That is awesome. I can use that in my life also. I think it's neat. You were talking about earlier how God might look at you as like, you're having your tantrum and I still love you. So it's that, you can be all the things and
Mhm.
still God's with you. That's awesome.
Meaghan, as we wrap this up, what are the things that you wish you had known about grief as you were going through this process that you now understand?
Well, what I've learned is that grief is not a linear thing. It's not, oh, you're in denial, now you're angry, now you've accepted it. Done. Congratulations, you've graduated from your grief cycle. It's so circular. It's just all over the place. You're going to hit these emotions at different times, and they'll repeat and they'll come back and they'll go in any order they want. Um, and it's just helpful to know that and not to feel limited. I suppose. The other thing was, the scripture where the God of all comfort, who comforts us so that we can comfort others, just took on a new meaning for me. Oh, so we have these specific experiences, so we know how to help others going through the same thing. So I feel equipped to do that. And it's actually, that's what I can count as joy through this trial is learning how to help others in this particular situation.
Meaghan, thank you so much for joining us today and for your wise words and for sharing your very poignant experience. We really appreciate that.
Well, thank you. I do love to talk about James.